Hi and welcome to Boston Media Theory. I'm Marcus Breen. This is a show where we talk to people from around Boston who are interested in the media and who are active in maybe undertaking research as academics, researchers, consultants, and directly as activists. And of course, people who are writing about media or mediated activities, such as poets. Today I'm delighted to welcome Jill Chaney from Jewish Voice for Peace. Welcome, Jill. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about the JVP presence, if you like, in the news. So that's definitely a media angle, but also as part of what we might think of as a social movement, and the importance of the connection of JVP to the kinds of challenges that are faced in our society today, and certainly the challenges that are facing Palestinian people and also Jewish people. Many challenges, of course. To start with, I wanted to read, if you don't mind, and I should say welcome, because a special welcome because you live in Newton and we're here recording this at New TV in Newton. I wanted to read, by way of a start, a statement from Jewish Voice for Peace from several years ago. I think it was from the Second Intifada or thereabouts, and it summarises some of the key principles and objectives of JVP, and then after that Jill and I can talk for a little while. Jewish Voice for Peace. In this time of tremendous suffering and fear, from Jerusalem to Gaza and from Hebron to Beersheba, we reaffirm that all Israelis and Palestinians deserve security, justice and equality, and we mourn all those who have died. Our unshakable commitment to freedom and justice for all compels us to acknowledge that this violence has fallen overwhelmingly on Palestinians. And it compels us to affirm that this violence has a root cause, Israel's illegal occupation. We are united in our belief that the denial of Palestinian human rights must end, illegal settlements must end, bombing civilians must end, killing children must end, valuing Jewish lives at the expense of others must end. Only by embracing equality for all peoples can this terrible bloodshed end. It's a very strong and persuasive statement from JVP. So Jill, can you tell us where this kind of statement comes from? What is the, if you like, the brief history of JVP and why an organisation like this would make such a strong statement?
Well, I think JVP feels especially, and the members feel especially responsible as Jews and as U.S. citizens, because as U.S. citizens, we are complicit in the occupation and the apartheid regime right now. We send over lots and lots of military equipment, the weapons, and we give them a lot of support as U.S. citizens. Also, Israel gets a ton of money privately from U.S. citizens. So as Jews and as U.S. citizens, we feel like we are compelled to make sure that we are fighting for justice and freedom and equality for everyone, and not at the expense, being safe, not at the expense of another people. And that's what is going on, of course, in the policies that are going on in Israel.
Right, it seems quite a reasonable point of view, and unfortunately there doesn't seem much reasonableness from the Israeli government. So it's difficult to think that you can keep your, what would we say, a sort of level-headedness in a situation where there's so much irrationality and really probably stupidity, compared to saying, here's a clear set of principles. Why can't we just agree that these principles should apply universally to everybody?
Well, you probably know that Israel has a plan and has had a plan since the state of Israel was birthed.
Right.
And
1947. Is that right?
Well, 48. Right.
48.
And we know that, we think, and we know, and our belief is that Israel wanted the land, and too bad if someone else was living on that land, because they would have to go. And they were expelled. 750,000 Palestinians were expelled then. And in order for the Israeli government to continue to say they are a Jewish state, they need to be a majority and they need to have the land. So that is what their plan is, and at any means, and making it very difficult, to put it mildly, for Palestinians not only in Gaza but also in the West Bank, for sure.
Right.
And also, they make it difficult for Jews who are not Ashkenazi Jews to live in Israel proper. They are discriminated against also. So their sort of supremacist policies not only oppress the Palestinians, but also the Jews who are not of Ashkenazi descent.
Well, that's a very interesting perspective, which I wasn't aware of, and which is useful to think that we're, even within the Jewish community, there's prejudice against people who are not considered whatever Ashkenazi consider themselves.
That's European,
Yeah.
and there's Mizrahi and Sephardic and African, so yeah.
Right, a
Yeah.
great deal of things. So why is it that JVP is, at least you might be able to correct me, but why JVP is the singular Jewish voice? Is it or am I wrong, the only Jewish voice calling for peace in the way that JVP does?
The other very prominent Jewish group is called If Not Now,
Okay.
and they are a Jewish group. They're mainly including members who are younger, and they have been working toward peace and trying very hard also to push to minimize and to do something about the occupation. So they too are a Jewish voice.
Right.
JVP is more intergenerational. We're multiracial. We're a grassroots organization, which If Not Now is also, and we're also cross-class. So JVP has a little different of a makeup than If Not Now. They have very similar beliefs, and they have very similar values, and they have been fighting also way before what has recently occurred in Gaza and in Israel.
What would you make of, or what do you make of a group that makes a very clear distinction between the ideological claims of Zionism to be a pure expression of Judaism, let's say, and then the group that says, well, actually Zionism is not really Judaism? So there's a group called Torah Judaism, for example, who seem to be very orthodox or ultra-orthodox or something. Where does that sort of movement of a very strict religious, theological orientation fit?
Well, there are some beliefs in Zionism like that, but what we believe in JVP is that it's a political ideology, and it is, the whole thrust was to create a homeland. That was the end product of the system, the Zionist plan, and as a result, it has forced the Palestinians out, and it has demolished homes, and it has killed children. So it is a political ideology. It's a nationalist ideology, and so that's just where we are at with how we believe it, and how's it working? Not great, It's just really to me and to JVP a destructive ideology that is a supremacist belief, right? That has to elevate one group above another in order to create safety. And as Jews, we don't believe that we need to oppress others for us to be safe. We believe that we can all be safe in an environment that has equality and justice as its center.
Right, great. So what does this, the current situation with what seems like a pretty solid majoritarian support for Israel within the Jewish community mean? You know, so what does it say about?
Well,
I know we don't really have time to address
it appears that way, and many Democrats, many Jewish Democrats, especially younger Democrats, are very much for a pro-Palestinian stance and for equality, and there's much less of a connection to the land of Israel. They have less of a memory of the Holocaust. So there is really, you're hearing that from the mainstream narrative, from the mainstream, they call legacy Jewish organizations, who really push that narrative and definitely are more in connection with the media to get that word out. And yes, there is a huge, we're up against a lot of pro-Israel members of the Jewish community. And they have the megaphone mostly. And you can see that the movement from JVP and from If Not Now and from a lot of Palestinian groups, of course, has really elevated and changed some of that narrative that's going on right now.
Right. I wanted to talk to you a bit more about that, and we'll do that because of the importance of the relationship between the claims that are made through the media, which then operates as an amplifier or a megaphone for particular points of view, often to the detriment of diversity, which we might think of as being something that operates in a democracy. But we don't seem to get much diversity. However, JVP has been active, it seems to me, in contributing to the diversity of opinions. It's very important. What do you think, taking on that idea of a relatively small number of groups that have the bulk of the imagination of the American public, how should we understand that sort of anti-Arab, racist, supremacist sort of ideology, particularly in the United States? I mean, why does it have such traction here? How is this? I know there's a lot of themes in that question. It's unfair in some respects.
There are a lot of themes, and you know, I'm just conjecturing, right?
Sure.
I mean, I don't know for sure. I mean, I look at it as the Israeli propaganda that has really been fomenting for years and years and years and years. It conflates being pro-Israel with being Jewish. So it conflates those two pieces, and it weaponizes any kind of criticism of Israel as being anti-Semitic. So it weaponizes anti-Semitism so that it diverts from the real issues that are going on in Israel. So people can think, oh my gosh, am I anti-Semitic? Because and I guess to show that I'm not, I better be against the Arab people. Because there's this image that I believe is from the propaganda that if you're Arab, you're a terrorist. And they put those two together, and then it keeps getting repeated and repeated. And some of the people I know who are Palestinian have been called to the table when someone has said, well, I hear that you are anti-Semitic, a boss of somebody. And the person said, the Palestinian person said, well, what do you mean? What did I say? And it was really that she was Palestinian. That was the definition of being anti-Semitic.
That's incredible.
Isn't that incredible? And that happened here in Boston in the medical community.
So your existence is anti-Semitic.
That's right. If you say that, and as you know, I mean, I know you want to get into a little bit of the media and the narrative that's going on, but even to say the word Palestinian was verboten many years ago. And you'll know and see, of course, that little by little, and I think with the help of people like members of JVP and the organization, elevating the priority of equality and humanity, that those words are starting to change a bit.
Well, let's hope so, and let's hope that the nature of the politics. I mean, the politics is really a struggle. Should be a struggle without violence, right? And unfortunately, we have an enormous amount of violence underway on the part of the experienced by the Palestinian people, but meted out or directed at them by the State of Israel. So we have this question of, what to make of the state. Is it we just go back to the problem of Zionism as a problem? We're stuck with that?
Well, we're stuck with the laws that Israel has created. We're stuck with a very right-wing government,
right. Yeah,
as everybody acknowledges. We're stuck with this notion that supremacy is okay. And there's also, as we know, there's this recent declaration from Netanyahu, forget about the two-state. And
right.
of course, we never thought that they thought anything about doing a two-state anyway. So what do we do? Well, what do? We keep pushing and pushing for equality, for humanitarian priorities, for really pushing to stop the blockade of Gaza when this horrible stage is over, to allow freedom and equality, and also in the West Bank, as we know, this is not just in Gaza that we're talking about. And we can't change their laws in Israel, but we need to keep pushing internationally for equality. And I don't know if you were going to ask about this, but I did want to bring up that just tomorrow, the ICF, the International Court of ICJ, the International Court of Justice, will be coming up and coming down with their decision about whether or not there's been genocide going on.
So that will be what, the 25th of January?
Tomorrow. Yeah, right.
Yes,
whatever number it is tomorrow.
Yes.
Right.
Friday.
7 a.m.
That's exciting. Okay, well, let's hope that it goes in the way that those seeking justice and peace will be happy about. Let's talk again about the narrative, media narratives, and I wanted to hold up this sign because one of the things that often doesn't happen is that we don't simply see in a relatively benign environment such as this the kind of image of not only seeking peace and a ceasefire, but the image of Palestinian identity. And so I wanted to hold that up partly to make the point that what we're talking about is not only the identity of an entire people, but the idea of peace through a total absence of warfare. And how we get to the point where the narrative, the media narrative, can be changed. What's your experience with this? Have you talked to journalists? Have you talked to producers? And what do they say? How do they respond to the claims that JVP makes when the dominant narrative, as we say in communication and cultural studies, is entirely antithetical, as it seems to me, to peace and to a ceasefire? What has happened?
Well, as a matter of fact, we've just had a meeting with the editor of the Boston Globe.
Oh, wonderful.
And we were really talking about the definition of anti-Semitism, because I think that's what's really going on right now. The conversation and the dialogue seems to be around, if you're not with Israel, then you're anti-Semitic, right? To ignore, to dissuade, to dispel the reality, and to get Israel to be accountable for the violence that's going on right now. So how do we respond to that? We just keep pushing our narrative and make sure that people are clear about what they mean when they say anti-Semitism. Well, does that mean going to a protest is an anti-Semitic act, according to one of the prominent legacy Jewish mainstream organizations? They consider that in their data. So we make sure that we push back on the language, the narratives in the newspapers. We do a lot of letters to the editor, and we get a lot of them in. which is really amazing. So that is what we're trying to do. We just stay firm with our narrative and use all of our knowledge and our hearts and all of what we've been organizing for years, for absolute years. So we won't back down.
Well, you won't back down, and I have to say that maybe one of the things that's a positive about the United States is not only do we have something called the Fourth Estate, which regularly fails, but we have the public space in which you can participate, in which I can participate, in which a TV show or anything can really be said, pretty much under the free speech moniker, but also the relationship between that and the emergence of voices of protest. I mean, it's an opportunity, isn't it? It
is an opportunity, and I'm also recollecting. I've been to, of course, you can imagine, many demonstrations and rallies and stand-ups.
I think I've seen you at
some. Yeah, right. And when journalists are there, representing large networks and small networks, the journalists, the reporters, seem so taken by the messaging. It doesn't always get translated into the higher-ups and the executives. You can just see the humanity of the journalists and how they're learning, and they're asking all those questions, like you are also, to find out more about the issues. And that has been very heartening, very, very heartening.
I'm sure. And what about social media? Has that been an important or useful vehicle for JVP?
It has been major. Our Instagram account is huge. We have lots and lots of new members, and people might make sense of this, that as a result of this horror that has occurred, is occurring, there has been an amazing amplification of interest and motivation. Thousands of new members have been joining. Seattle, for example, Seattle JVP chapter has had 450 new members join in the last couple of months. There are over 75 JVP chapters around the nation, and there are new ones starting. People are trying really hard to begin. So yes, social media is huge. It is absolutely huge. I say to my friends, any organization that doesn't have an Instagram account, they don't exist. Because this is how the youngsters and not the older people, they're still on Facebook, but we have a Facebook presence, a Twitter presence, a TikTok presence, an Instagram presence, so a website, of course.
Right. So creating a counter-narrative, as it were, to the dominant mainstream narrative, which I think I would have to say, and you can tell me whether you agree or not, the dominant narrative has really tended to merge the dominant US government or official point of view with what we might think of as the liberal New York Times point of view.
That's right. Well, I put it into the warmongering department. We all know that politicians are way behind the people. Democrats are in the majority wanting a ceasefire. The Jews have become much less connected, as I said before, to using Israel as their focal point as people get further and further away from the Holocaust. And that's the scenario, and that's what I think Israel really plays on a lot, is that, and to oppress, to really turn the tables on the heartache. Of course, we have gone through a genocide as Jews, and I don't have personal family members who had been affected by the Holocaust. And when I went to Hebrew school from kindergarten through 12th grade, I learned a ton about the Holocaust, and I just could not imagine humans doing anything like that. And so JVP says, never again, but never again for anyone at all.
That's a wonderful sentiment, and I'm sure it's something we can all agree with, and I wish we could all agree with it, and I wish we could say, well, go right back, the idea of universal principles that all human beings might want to agree on, and that would certainly be part of part of the story, and it is a terrible contradiction to think of the experience of Jewish people, particularly in Europe, of the Holocaust, and now what's happening
It's very
in
painful.
Israel.
It's painful as a Jew. It is. I'm ashamed, and it's just heart-wrenching.
Right. And it's difficult, I think, for those of us who aren't Jewish to then say, well, how should we react? There's sort of various layers of the accusations about whether or not you're anti-Semitic, whether or not you're just by supporting the Palestinian cause, or saying, well, there's a role for resistance in social movements, or a role for resistance in overthrowing forces of oppression. All this is often given to misinterpretation.
Which people who are oppressed have not resisted?
Right, yeah. I think that's probably a pretty good place to finish. Jill Chaney, thank you very much. Jewish Voice for Peace. It's a national organisation, right?
Absolutely.
Does it have any international connections?
Oh, many,
Really?
many, with lots of solidarity movements all over the world.
The world.
Absolutely. South Africa, of course, and all Europe and South America, everywhere. Yeah, lots of connection.
Great. And people can find it on all those social media platforms.
Absolutely. Jewish
Right.
Voice for Peace Boston, or Jewish Voice for Peace, which is the national website.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jill. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
So that's it from me and from Boston Media Theory. Until next time, keep on mediating, and I'll see you later.